Hey there, it's Keith, and welcome to another 5-minute video. I wanted to answer a question, and it's taken me a while, I apologize. I posted something on Facebook recently, and someone asked me if I would do a 5-minute video on this topic. And that is about what it means to love our enemies. And this was more of a practical question, not a should we love our enemies, sort of like providing evidence for whether or not we should, but assuming that we should. How do we do it? How do we practically obey Jesus' command to love our enemies? Well, I think as with anything that involves obeying Jesus' commands, it has to begin with abiding in Him. So, in other words, it's not something that we can do in our own strength, because frankly, almost all of the commands that Jesus gives are the kinds of things that we cannot do apart from Him. In other words, if we're not abiding in Him, we can't possibly do those things. Jesus even told us that, right? You know what I'm talking about. He said, unless you abide in me and I abide in you, you can do nothing, right? Apart from me, He said, you can do nothing. But if you abide in me and I abide in you, you will bear much fruit. And so the only way we can love our enemies, turn the other cheek, bless those who curse us, do good to those who hate us, anything that involves exhibiting the heart and the character and the life of Christ, none of that can be accomplished in our own strength. None of it. And Jesus knows that. So that's honestly where it begins. Now, practically, how do we do it? So let's assume that we are submitting our life to Christ. We are dying to ourselves, which means we are putting aside our flesh, our way of thinking, our way of doing things, our sort of knee-jerk reactions. We're laying those on the altar. We're crucifying those. We're surrendering those to Christ. How do we now love our enemies, or how do we bless those who hate us? So I don't know if I can do this in the time I got left, but we'll see. Practically, we just do it. By faith, we say, Jesus, I can't do this. Would you help me to do this? And so, as an example, I have done this before where, someone has hurt me. A Christian, a friend, a brother has betrayed me, and I'm really hurt. And so I will get on my knees and begin, in obedience to Christ, I will begin to pray a blessing over that person. Now, not because I feel it, but because Jesus told me to. And He's told me that I should do this. So I'm in the beginning, I'm just doing it out of sheer obedience, not out of emotion. But because I'm doing it in obedience, and I'm asking Jesus to help me to do it for real, He then does help me. And then after praying a blessing over this brother, I suddenly my heart breaks for him, and I really do love him, and I really do forgive him, and I really do want God to bless his marriage and his children and his job and his finances and his life, right? Specifically turning the other cheek and loving enemies. One example, a practical example, a real-world example for me, my oldest son, when he was very young, there was a boy in his class, in his elementary class, who was choking him, we found out, during recess. And of course, as a parent, you hear that and your first reaction is, oh my gosh, how dare anyone let that happen, right? And again, I wanted to teach my son how to physically fight back. This was before I was convinced that Christians shouldn't do that. My wife, God bless her, said, no, Keith, we can't do that. We have to show Dylan how to respond, our son Dylan, how to respond the way Jesus would. So every night we would pray for that young man by name. We would begin to try to think about what his life must be like and why he was acting violently towards my son and others. Then my son had a birthday a few months later, and we invited that boy to the birthday party along with all the others. We had him sit right next to Dylan. We let him play in all the games. We treated him and loved him as if he was our best friend. And you know what? It changed his heart. After that, he stopped that behavior and he became a good friend. Right? Because we responded in love, we didn't respond with the same emotion, with the same spirit that he was coming at my son with. That's a real world example. And here's the thing too. Sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes it's beautiful and people's hearts melt and respond. And that's the intention. Jesus has us do those things in the hopes that the kingdom's going to break in. And they're going to be astounded that you have returned love when they've been giving you hate. That's the purpose. But you know what? Sometimes it won't happen that way. Or at least you won't experience it or see it that way. And you have to do it anyway. Right? So we don't do it just to get the result. We hope and pray for that result, for that change in that person. But if that change doesn't come in that person, I tell you something that will happen. There'll be a change in you. And really, that's what we are most concerned about, right? We want our own heart, our own character, our own lives to reflect Christ. And as long as that happens, we let God worry about the rest, okay? Thanks for listening. I hope that answers the question. And if you have any other questions, please let me know. I'd love to do another video on that topic. God bless. Thanks for listening.